The storm outside matched my inner turmoil, a fierce wind howling as I stood at the edge of a decision that felt both thrilling and terrifying. The rain lashed against the window, each drop a reminder of the weight of my choice. Should I accept Nolan's invitation? My heart raced as I replayed his words in my mind. Just a casual visit, he had said. But deep down, I felt the tension in the air, a tension that begged to be released. As I drove through the gusty streets, the headlights of my car slicing through the darkness, I wondered if I was making a mistake. I glanced at my phone, the screen lighting up with messages from Thomas. "Where are you?" it read. I hesitated before replying, the guilt creeping in. I had promised I would be home, but something about Nolan's invitation pulled at me, like a thread unraveling from a tightly woven fabric. When I finally arrived at Nolan's house, the atmosphere was electric. The flickering lights inside seemed to dance with the storm outside, both chaotic and beautiful. I took a deep breath, my pulse quickening as I stepped onto the porch. The door opened before I could knock, and there he stood, Nolan, with a smile that sent a shiver down my spine. "Alara," he said, his voice warm and inviting. "I'm glad you came." "Me too," I replied, though a part of me wasn't so sure. The excitement mingled with apprehension, a cocktail of emotions I didn't know how to handle. The moment I crossed the threshold, I felt the weight of my mundane life slipping away, even if just for a few hours. As we settled in, the conversation flowed easily, yet I felt as if he could see right through me. "You seem different," he remarked, studying me with those intense eyes. "What's on your mind?" I hesitated, unsure if I should reveal the turmoil inside. "Just life, I guess," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. Nolan leaned forward, his expression sincere. "Life can be heavy. Sometimes we need to escape it for a little while." His words struck a chord within me, igniting questions I had buried for far too long. Was this night merely an escape, or was it something more dangerous? I couldn't shake the feeling that accepting his invitation was a step towards a path I had long denied. The laughter we shared felt thrilling, yet it also carried an undercurrent of risk. I glanced at him, his smile infectious, but I could see the depth behind his playful demeanor. Did he know what I was grappling with? Did he sense my longing for something different? The evening wore on, and with each passing moment, my internal struggle deepened. I found myself drawn to him, the chemistry palpable. As we spoke about dreams and desires, I felt a stirring within me, emotions I thought I had locked away. "What do you truly want, Alara?" he asked, and the question hung in the air like a challenge. I hesitated, my heart racing. I wanted to scream that I craved passion, excitement, life beyond the walls of my marriage, but I couldn't. Instead, I shrugged, masking my turmoil with a laugh. "I want to be happy, I guess." Nolan's gaze held mine, and for a moment, the world outside faded away. It was just the two of us, locked in a moment that felt both exhilarating and dangerous. As he reached out to touch my arm, a casual gesture that lingered just a heartbeat too long, I felt a jolt of electricity. I knew then that the line between friendship and something more was blurring. "Do you ever feel like taking risks?" he asked, his voice low and inviting. I swallowed hard, the weight of his words crashing over me like the storm outside. "Sometimes," I replied, my voice shaky. "But it's complicated." "Complicated can be good," he said, his eyes searching mine. "It means you're alive." I could feel the pull between us, a magnetic force that threatened to unravel everything I had known. As the storm raged on outside, I wondered if this night would be the escape I craved, or the beginning of something I had long denied. Would I dare to step into the unknown, or would I retreat back to the safety of my familiar life? As I sat across from Nolan, The weight of the storm outside felt like a distant memory, overshadowed by the intensity of our conversation. I could hear the rain tapping against the window, but my focus was entirely on him. Each word he spoke seemed to pull me deeper into a world I had almost forgotten, a world filled with dreams and aspirations. "You know," Nolan said, leaning forward slightly, "I used to want to be an artist. I had this dream of painting the stories I saw in my head." I smiled, intrigued. "Really? What happened to that dream?" He shrugged, a hint of sadness in his eyes. "Life happened, I guess. I got caught up in the routine and forgot what it felt like to create." His words resonated with me. I thought of my own dreams, the ones I had set aside for a life of responsibilities and predictability. "I can relate to that," I admitted. "I used to write poetry. It felt like a release, but somewhere along the way, I lost that part of myself." Nolan's gaze was steady, as if he could see the flickering flame of my passion beneath the surface. "Why did you stop?" he asked gently. I hesitated, the truth hanging in the air like the storm clouds outside. "I don't know. Maybe I thought it was time to grow up and be practical." "But what if being practical means giving up who you truly are?" he challenged, his voice laced with an intensity that made my heart race. I felt a stir of emotions I had buried for so long. "I guess I never thought about it that way," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. "I just thought I had to be a good wife, a good mother." Nolan smiled, but it was bittersweet. "There's more to you than just those roles, Alara. You deserve to explore what makes you happy." As we shared our stories, laughter filled the room, and the distance between us began to shrink. It felt thrilling, this connection we were building. Nolan was unlike anyone I had known. He sparked something inside me, a longing I had tucked away for years. "Do you believe in second chances?" I asked suddenly, the vulnerability of my question hanging between us. He paused, his expression thoughtful. "I think everyone deserves a second chance to find what makes them feel alive." The moment was electric. I felt a warmth radiate from my chest, and I found myself leaning closer to him, drawn in by an invisible force. The laughter faded, replaced by an intimacy that felt both exciting and dangerous. Then, it happened. A casual touch of his hand brushed against mine, and the air changed. The room felt smaller, and the sound of the rain faded into the background. That simple touch lingered too long, and I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. "Are we crossing a line here?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. Nolan's gaze held mine, and I could see the conflict in his eyes. "Maybe," he admitted softly, "but maybe that line needs to be crossed." The tension in the room thickened, and I knew I was standing at a precipice, looking down into a chasm of uncertainty. I had come here seeking an escape, but now I was faced with a choice, one that could unravel everything I had built with Thomas. "Is this just a fleeting moment for you?" I asked, my heart racing with fear and anticipation. "Or is there something more?" Nolan took a deep breath, his expression serious. "I don't want this to be just a moment. I think there's something real between us." His words sent shivers down my spine. I felt alive, yet terrified. I knew I was on the verge of something that could change everything. The line between friendship and something more was blurring, and I was caught in the middle, unsure of which direction to take. In that moment, I realized I had a decision to make. Was I ready to embrace the thrill of the unknown, or would I retreat back to the safety of my mundane life? The storm outside raged on, but inside, a different kind of tempest was brewing, one that stirred my heart and awakened desires I had long denied. The sudden darkness enveloped us, swallowing the room in a thick silence. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I stood there, unsure of what to do. The storm outside raged on, but inside, there was a different kind of storm brewing, one that stirred emotions I had buried deep within me. "Nolan?" I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. The shadows around me felt heavy, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to be alone in them. "Right here," he replied softly, his voice a comforting anchor in the chaos. I could hear him moving closer, the sound of his footsteps steadying my racing thoughts. I took a deep breath, trying to push back the wave of feelings threatening to spill over. "Do you think the power will come back soon?" I asked, attempting to fill the silence with something mundane. "Honestly, I don't know," he admitted. "But sometimes, darkness can help us see things more clearly." His words hung in the air, and I felt a chill run down my spine. What did he mean by that? I could feel his presence beside me, warm and inviting, and it made me question everything I thought I knew about myself. "Can we just talk?" I suggested, my voice trembling slightly. I needed to say something, anything, to cut through the tension that crackled between us. "Of course," he said, and I could sense the seriousness in his tone. "What do you want to talk about?" I hesitated, unsure of how to navigate the conversation. "About love and desire," I finally said, my heart racing at the vulnerability of my words. "What do you think they really mean?" Nolan was silent for a moment, and I wondered if I had gone too far. But then he spoke, his voice low and thoughtful. "Love is complicated. It can lift you up or tear you apart. Desire? That's even trickier. It pulls you toward things you think you want, but it can also lead to pain." His honesty struck a chord within me. I had spent so long pushing my desires down, convincing myself that my marriage to Thomas was enough. "I've always thought love was supposed to be secure, safe," I confessed. "But lately, I feel restless, like something is missing." Nolan stepped closer, and the electricity in the air intensified. "Maybe it's not about safety. Maybe it's about passion, about feeling alive," he said, his voice charged with emotion. "We shouldn't ignore what our hearts tell us." His words resonated deep within me, awakening something I had long suppressed. I looked into his eyes, and for the first time, I felt seen, truly seen. It was as if he could peel back the layers I had built around myself, exposing my fears and desires. "What if I'm wrong?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "What if this is just a fantasy?" "Maybe it is," he replied, taking another step closer. "But sometimes, fantasies reveal the truths we hide from ourselves." In that moment, the distance between us shrank to nothing. I could feel the warmth radiating from him, and the air felt charged with anticipation. My heart raced as he leaned in, and I knew I was at a crossroads. I could pull back, retreat into the safety of my old life, or I could give in to the passion that beckoned me forward. I hesitated, my breath hitching in my throat. "Nolan, But before I could finish, he closed the gap between us, his lips brushing against mine in a tentative yet electric kiss. Everything around us faded away. The storm, the darkness, even the doubts that had clouded my mind. It was just us, lost in a moment that felt both thrilling and terrifying. As our kiss deepened, I felt a rush of emotions I had long denied. The passion ignited something inside me, awakening desires I had buried beneath layers of routine and obligation. I was no longer just Alara, the wife, the mother, the dutiful partner. I was a woman, alive and yearning for something more. This was the moment of no return. In surrendering to this passion, I was stepping into a new reality, one filled with uncertainty and possibility. The consequences of my actions loomed large, but in that instant, all that mattered was the connection we shared and the truth it revealed about myself. The first light of dawn crept through the curtains, casting soft shadows across the room. I blinked awake, my senses slowly returning to me. My heart raced as I realized I was wrapped in Nolan's arms, his breath warm against my neck, A rush of conflicting emotions washed over me: euphoria, guilt, and an overwhelming sense of fear. How did I get here? As I lay there, I felt the weight of my actions pressing down on me. My mind flashed back to the night before, the laughter, the secret touches, the kiss that changed everything. I carefully shifted away from Nolan, trying not to wake him, and sat on the edge of the bed. The silence of the room was deafening, filled with unspoken words and the reality of what I had done. I pulled my knees to my chest, staring at the floor. I had betrayed Thomas, the man I had promised to love forever. A wave of guilt crashed over me, making it hard to breathe. I thought of our life together, the years we had shared, and how far we had drifted apart. Could I really throw all that away for a night with someone who felt like a spark in my otherwise dim world? Just then, Nolan stirred, his voice a sleepy murmur. "Alara, are you okay?" I turned to him, and the concern in his eyes made my chest tighten. I'm not sure," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. "This feels so complicated." Nolan sat up, running a hand through his tousled hair. "I know, but last night felt real, didn't it?" His words hung in the air, pulling me deeper into the whirlpool of my emotions. "It did," I admitted. "But what about Thomas? What have I done?" Nolan's expression softened, and he moved closer to me, his gaze steady. "You deserve to be happy, Alara. We both felt something last night. It's okay to explore that." I shook my head. "But at what cost? I can't just forget about my life. I have responsibilities." A shadow crossed Nolan's face. "I understand, but you also have desires. You can't ignore them forever." My heart ached as I thought about Thomas. I wanted to be honest with him, but the thought of the fallout terrified me. "I need time to think," I said, my voice trembling. "This changes everything." Nolan nodded, his expression serious. "I'll give you space. Just know that I care about you, and I'm here if you need to talk." With that, I slipped out of bed and gathered my clothes, my mind racing. I dressed quickly, the weight of my choices heavy on my shoulders. As I opened the door to leave, I turned back to him. "Thank you for last night. It was different." He smiled softly, but I could see the worry in his eyes. "Just remember, it's okay to want more for yourself." I stepped out into the cool morning air, my heart still pounding. The world felt different, brighter, yet more daunting. I walked to my car, my mind replaying every moment with Nolan. His laughter, the warmth of his touch, the way he made me feel alive. But then, my thoughts turned to Thomas. What would I say when I got home? How could I face him knowing what I had done? As I drove, the familiar streets felt foreign, the trees lining the road a blur. I was trapped in a whirlwind of emotions, each turn bringing me closer to a confrontation I wasn't ready for. My heart sank at the thought of his face when he realized I was not the same woman who left that morning. When I finally pulled into my driveway, I took a deep breath. The house loomed ahead, a reminder of my life, my choices. I had to face the music. Stepping inside, I found Thomas sitting at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee in hand. He looked up and smiled, but that smile felt like a knife twisting in my gut. "Hey, you're back early. How was your night?" I opened my mouth to respond, but the words caught in my throat. I needed to be honest, but fear held me back. Instead, I forced a smile, knowing that the truth would unravel everything. "Just needed some time to think," I said, my voice shaky. Thomas nodded, oblivious to the storm brewing within me. As I sat down across from him, I realized that I was standing at a crossroads. I had to confront my true self and decide what I truly wanted. But for now, I would wear the mask of normalcy, even as the truth threatened to break free. As I stepped through the front door, the familiar scent of home hit me like a wave. But today, The warmth that usually wrapped around me felt hollow. Thomas was in the living room, his back turned as he flipped through a magazine. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. The night with Nolan replayed in my mind, a constant loop of confusion and guilt. "Hey, you're home early," Thomas said, looking up and smiling. His face was lit by the soft glow of the lamp, and for a moment, I felt a pang of longing for the life we once shared. "Yeah, I decided to come back," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. I forced a smile, but I could feel the tension building inside me. Thomas turned his attention back to the magazine, missing the turmoil swirling within me. I watched him, trying to remember the man I fell in love with, but all I saw were the cracks in our connection, the silence that had grown between us. "What did you do last night?" he asked, still focused on his reading. "Oh, just some errands. You know how it is," I said, my stomach twisting. I felt the weight of my lie press down on me. He nodded, still not looking up. "I made your favorite for dinner. We can eat together. It'll be nice." "Sure," I replied, my heart sinking. The thought of sitting across from him, pretending everything was fine, felt suffocating. I moved into the kitchen, my mind racing. I couldn't shake the feeling of Nolan's arms around me, how safe I felt in his embrace. I closed my eyes, trying to push the memories away, but they clung to me like shadows. As I chopped vegetables, the silence in the house grew heavier. I glanced at Thomas, who was now scrolling through his phone. "Is everything okay?" I asked, hoping to break the tension. "Yeah, just work stuff," he replied, not looking up. I nodded, feeling the distance between us. "I met someone last night," I blurted out before I could stop myself. The words hung in the air, heavy and charged. Thomas looked up, surprise flickering across his face. "Oh? Who?" I hesitated, panic washing over me. "Just a friend, from the past." His brow furrowed. "You mean Nolan?" I swallowed hard, my heart racing. "How did you know?" "I saw your text last week," he said, his voice steady but laced with hurt. I didn't think much of it at the time. I felt my chest tighten. "Thomas, it was just a casual meetup, nothing more." He put his phone down and crossed his arms. "But it meant something to you, didn't it?" I opened my mouth to deny it, but the truth hung in the air. "I don't know," I admitted, my voice shaking. "Maybe it did." Thomas stared at me, the hurt in his eyes cutting deep. "Alara, I thought we were happy. I thought we had something real." I felt tears prick at my eyes. I thought so too, but something has changed. He took a step closer, his expression softening. "What do you mean?" I took a shaky breath, the weight of my choices crashing down on me. "I feel trapped, Thomas. I feel like I've lost myself." His face fell, and for a moment, I saw the hurt child in him, the man who had loved me fiercely. "What can I do?" I shook my head, the pain of my confession clawing at my insides. "I don't know. I just need time to think." Thomas nodded slowly, the understanding in his eyes replaced by a shadow of sadness. "I just want you to be happy, Alara. But I can't change if I don't know what's wrong." The silence stretched between us, thick and painful. I wanted to reach out, to comfort him, but I felt so far away. I glanced out the window, the world outside moving on, as if nothing had changed. In that moment, I understood the weight of my decisions. I had to choose between the safety of my known life and the uncertainty of what lay ahead. My heart ached with the realization that whatever path I chose would lead to pain, either way. As Thomas turned away, I felt the walls of our life closing in on me. I was at a crossroads, and I needed to confront the truth of my desires. Would I stay in this loveless marriage, or would I embrace the unknown that beckoned me? The answer felt elusive, but one thing was clear. I had to find my way back to myself. The days after that night with Nolan felt like a whirlwind. I woke up each morning with a knot in my stomach, the weight of my choices pressing down on me. I needed to understand what I truly wanted, not just for my sake, but for everyone involved. It was time for a journey of self-discovery. I remember sitting at my kitchen table one morning, the sun spilling through the window, illuminating the dust particles dancing in the air. I sipped my coffee, staring at the steam rising, lost in thought. My phone buzzed on the table, pulling me from my reverie. It was a message from Nolan. "Can we talk? I need to see you." My heart raced. What did that mean? I hesitated, but finally replied, "Yes, let's meet." When the time came, I chose a quiet cafe, a place where I could think clearly. As I walked in, the familiar sense of coffee and pastries filled the air, but it did little to calm my nerves. I spotted Nolan at a corner table, his brows furrowed in thought, and my heart skipped. "Hey," I said softly as I approached. "Hey," he replied, offering a small smile. "I'm glad you came." We sat down, and for a moment, silence hung between us. I could feel the tension, a mix of excitement and fear. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened," I finally said, searching his eyes for understanding. "Me too," Nolan admitted, leaning in slightly. "I can't stop thinking about you, Alara. What we shared felt real." I took a deep breath, trying to gather my thoughts. It did, but I can't shake the feeling that it was wrong. I'm married, Nolan. I have a life that I've built with Thomas. "I understand," he said, his voice steady but gentle. "But does that life make you happy? Are you truly fulfilled?" His questions hit me hard. I wanted to answer honestly, but the truth was complicated. "I don't know," I confessed, my hands trembling slightly. "Some days, I feel trapped. Other days, I feel nothing." Nolan reached across the table, his hand brushing against mine. "You deserve to find what makes you happy. We all do, but it's not easy to walk away from what's familiar." I pulled my hand back, suddenly overwhelmed by the reality of our conversation. "What are we doing, Nolan? Are we really exploring a relationship? I have to think about the consequences." "I don't want to rush you," he said quickly, "but I believe there's something special between us, something worth exploring, even if it's scary." I felt a surge of emotions, fear, excitement, and a longing for something more. But what about Thomas? What will happen to him? Nolan's expression softened. "You have to be honest with yourself first. If you're not true to your feelings, it will only hurt everyone involved." Those words resonated deep within me. I realized I had been living my life for others, neglecting my own desires. I needed to reconnect with who I really was. "I need time," I finally said, "to figure things out." "I'll give you that time," Nolan replied. "But promise me you won't ignore what you feel. You deserve happiness, Ilara." As we talked, I began to understand the importance of self-acceptance. It became clear that I had to face my own heart, even if it meant confronting uncomfortable truths. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine when inside. I felt lost. After our conversation, I walked home feeling lighter, yet burdened with choices. Standing at the door, I hesitated. I knew I was at a crossroads, ready to make a choice that could define my future. As I stepped inside, Thomas greeted me with a smile, completely unaware of the turmoil in my heart. I felt a pang of guilt, but I also felt a flicker of hope. I was ready to explore my desires, to find my path. "Hey, how was your day?" he asked, oblivious to the storm brewing within me. "It was enlightening," I replied, forcing a smile. But deep down, I knew I could no longer ignore the truth. I had to confront my feelings, for better or worse. The journey of self-discovery had begun, and I was ready to embrace whatever came next. Share this story if you believe that self-discovery can lead to transformative change. Leave a comment about a time when you faced a difficult choice in your life, and subscribe to the channel for more captivating stories like this one. Your journey matters.